Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we perform cognitive triage on your sources and deliver the essential, unforgettable insights. Today, learner, we have a truly fascinating stack of documents, a pairing that seems, on the surface, utterly contradictory.
It really is, and that is the core tension we're exploring. Our sources juxtapose two wildly different forms of literature. On one hand, you have this deeply emotional, highly intimate, and often, darkly comedic narrative. It details a personal breakup, the messy separation of Georgie and her husband, Rip.
And on the other hand,
A set of cold, hard academic documents, specifically a textbook section titled Adhesives in the Modern World.
so chemistry and heartbreak.
Exactly.
Our mission, then, is to unpack this deliberate juxtaposition. We're looking for the common vocabulary between the intensely personal and the highly technical. How do concepts like adhesion, fracture mechanics, polymers, and the challenge of bonding dissimilar materials apply not just to glue on a laboratory bench, but to relationships, to community, historical trauma, and the complex search for a sense of belonging?
We are essentially searching for the right human glue. We're following Georgie's journey from this domestic fracture in a London suburb through let's call it the sticky enigma of Canaan House, and ultimately into the geopolitical fault lines of the Middle East, all of it guided by the technical principles of how things stick together or, more often how they fall violently apart.
And the whole deep dive begins with a sensory detail that is simultaneously, it's gross, it's funny, and it's perfectly symbolic of the sticky mess to come. Our initial hook is what the source calls the pungent start. It's Georgie's first encounter near Canaan House. She comes across a large white tomcat with 3 black socks and an ugly face. He's dubbed Wonder Boy.
Wonder Boy, the feline bruiser. He is not shy. His presence is announced by the distinct, aggressively territorial odor of a strong squirt of Oda tomcat.
Right.
And the text specifies that this odor has a pungent, faintly gluey smell.
A gluey smell, there it is.
There it is. This animal instinct, this marking of territory using a sticky, foul substance, is a perfect sort of primal foreshadowing of the often unpleasant, messy forms of adhesion and territoriality that define the human relationships we're about to examine.
Indeed. We're starting our journey right in the middle of a sticky, aggressive mess.
We dive straight into the fracture mechanics of a marriage. What's astonishing about Georgie and Rip's split is its trigger. It wasn't a grand betrayal or, a secret mistress. It was profoundly mundane.
It's almost disappointingly mundane.
It really is. It's centered entirely on a white porcelain Scandinavian-style toothbrush holder.
The scene the sources provide is perfect early morning chaos. You can just picture it. The coffee frothing machine is screaming, the toast is burning, Rip is completely focused on his BlackBerry and the grand abstract ideas of his work.
Right.
And Georgie simply asks him to find a moment to secure the toothbrush holder onto the wall. She even notes with his technical accuracy that it requires a raw plug job.
A small request for physical domestic adhesion. That's all it is.
Exactly.
And this small, practical request hits the fundamental stress point in their relationship. Rip reacts not with indifference, but with this high-minded contempt. He launches into a truly devastating, self-important speech that immediately just distrust. It negates Georgie's reality.
He says, some of us are trying to do something really worthwhile in the world, Georgie. Something that will contribute to human progress and shape the destiny of future generations. And then the killer line, and you witter on about a toothbrush.
Witter on. It's so harsh.
It is. That statement reveals that for Rip, his work, this progress project, is so globally abstract and frankly self-congratulatory that it renders Georgie's domestic reality, her attempts to create a functional home, utterly worthless.
Yeah, he sees her life as a distraction, a wittering, while he's off shaping the destiny of future generations. The core incompatibility isn't personality, it's a profound mismatch in perceived priorities and values.
This is a perfect illustration of how stress fractures begin, right? In material science, failure often occurs at the point of greatest internal tension, even if the external force is small.
Precisely. The toothbrush holder wasn't the cause. It was simply the final, required application of force that exposed the catastrophic structural flaw, which was Rip's fundamental disregard for Georgie's world.
And the fracture happens instantly, physically, with a minor explosion. Georgie's arm involuntarily jerks, and she splatters him with milky froth. The chemical reaction of the cappuccino machine turned into a weapon.
And we're given this incredible cinematic detail. The froth gets all over Rip. the walls, his precious blackberry, and a single gob of foam catches and hangs, quivering goopily, in the blonde hairs of his left eyebrow.
That image is fantastic. A tiny, quivering, milky glob of domestic chaos ends a marriage.
It's a literal separation happening in miniature, and Rip leaves immediately, stony-faced. He's not going for a moment to cool down, no. This is for the permanent separation represented by the top-floor flat of his Australian squash partner and senior colleague, Pectoral Pete.
Pectoral Pete.
The kind of man who makes loud, aggressive jokes about lesbians. This shows Rip prioritizing his professional, masculine environment over his domestic life without a moment's hesitation.
So the aftermath for Georgie is this visible transition through the emotional stages of unbonding. It's like a material cooling and reacting after a sudden shock. First, the sources describe the crying phase. She's standing outside Pete's lighted windows, down there in the dark with tears pouring down my face. Pure grief of loss.
But then, that emotional material hardens. The surface tension breaks and rage takes over. She begins kicking Rip's discarded shoes, which still carry a faint, irritating whiff of him.
And her new task becomes preparing all of Rip's junk, his intellectual and personal junk for the skiff. The filing cabinet stuffed with his progress, the back copies of The Economist and New Statesman.
And, most bitterly, his used underpants.
Yes. Her rage is focused on the disposal of his waste, the material remnants of his contempt. She bitterly notes, "What was I supposed to do, take them out and wash them?" This act of physical clearance, preparing his history and his physical remnants for the garbage skip, is her own attempt to clean the surface. Not for readhesion, but for complete, irreversible separation.
But the true, deep-seated casualty, the material that cannot be easily separated, is Ben, their son. The source describes him as being broken in half and divided between the parents.
Which is such a powerful image.
It is. Because the parents cannot adhere, Ben must create an incredibly rigid, precise schedule to manage the trauma. He meticulously ticks off the days. Sunday through Tuesday with Dad, Wednesday through Friday with Mom.
And Saturday is the tricky one, alternating.
Right. The parent's inability to adhere forces the child into a hyper-structured, fearful existence defined entirely by a calendar.
This is where Georgie's personal pain finds an outlet. The writing cure, as the source calls it. She continues her corporate technical job writing about marine biological glues and polymers, but her emotional life is pouring into her fictional draft, The Splattered Heart.
The drafts.
Yeah.
They're fascinating because the characters are these thinly disguised versions of themselves, Gina and Rick, or Hick. And they show Georgie processing not just Rip's infidelity or his contempt, but these deep-seated class differences that contributed to the initial, fragile bond.
She recalls Rip insisting she doesn't feel unequal, but she thinks fiercely. "Of course I bloody do. I don't know what to do with all the knives and forks. I feel as though they look down their hoity-toity noses at me."
So she's exploring the different materials they tried to bond in the first place. She saw Rip as her door into Pemberley Hall and Mansfield Park.
High literature, high society.
Right, and she felt he saw her as his door into a world of noble savages and grassroots socialism. Her conclusion in the drafts is that they were so full of illusions about each other, maybe it was bound to end in a splattering.
The bond was based on wish fulfillment, not reality.
Yeah.
So it lacked the necessary strength to withstand any real stress.
The fiction, therefore, becomes a therapeutic form of intellectual adhesion. She's using the narrative to try and stick the pieces of her own identity back together. She's linking her personal failure to broader social fractures. She dreams of transgressing boundaries during the miners' strike, connecting her individual romantic failure to the massive, historic class and political divides she grew up witnessing in kickbacks.
And that sense of massive, global, inevitable conflict is mirrored perfectly in their son, Ben. While Georgie is trying to glue herself back together through fiction, Ben embraces the absolute, final, total fracture, the end of the world.
Ben, the teenager experiencing this profound liminal anxiety, is spending hours closeted with his computer. Liminal, of course, meaning existing at a threshold, a point of transition. He's stuck between two parents, two homes, and he is seeking an explanation for this chaos in the most extreme external narratives possible.
When Georgie walks in, he minimizes the screen, but she catches glimpses of words flashing in red flames. Armageddon and Antichrist.
And we get access to the chat logs. Benbow and Spikey, they are deep into end-time prophecies. They discuss candidates for the Antichrist: Putin, Bush, Prince Charles, Pope Benedict XVI, and focus obsessively on the Mark of the Beast, 666, which they believe is encoded in Duchy of Cornwall barcodes.
It's an intellectual structure built entirely on fear and absolute certainty.
And this is a critical psychological point, learner. When the immediate personal bonds of family and safety fracture, the human need for adhesion doesn't disappear. It seeks the strongest, most rigid structure available. Ben finds comfort in absolute prophecy, an external, non-negotiable code that explains why everything is falling apart, and assigns a clear meaning to the chaos. He sees unearthly light in the sky, reflecting his inner state of transition and his search for a divine, inescapable framework.
So we've gone from a toothbrush holder to the apocalypse. Georgie has experienced a catastrophic domestic fracture, and she now needs to find a new structure, a new surface to bond to. Where does she go when the conventional middle-class suburban glue fails?
Well, Georgie's search for a new anchor leads her down a path entirely dictated by chance and chaos, straight to the delightfully bizarre Mrs. Shapiro and Canaan house.
Their first encounter is brilliant. It's established entirely around discarded things. Georgie hears a noise and finds a woman, Mrs. Shapiro, outside, pulling records of great Russian composers, Tchaikovsky, Shostakovich, Prokofiev, out of garbage skip.
I love the description of Mrs. Shapiro's voice. It's rich brown, crumbly like fruitcake. She's immediately established as a woman of profound resourcefulness and cultural defiance. She declares that only barbarian types would discard such music. This philosophy of finding value in the discarded and the damaged is instantly resonant with Georgie.
Absolutely. This bargain hunting reminds Georgie of her own mother in Kipax, who was a great advocate of past sell-by-date shopping.
Yeah.
The family mantra was waste not, want not, reflecting this deep insecurity about money. Georgie suddenly feels a queasy kinship with the out-of-date curled at the corners pastry she used to shop for. Mrs. Shapiro's maxim, always tastes better when you pay less, isn't just thrift. It's a lesson in survival and making the most of damaged materials.
So the initial bond is one of necessity and a shared history of scarcity, and this bond deepens when Georgie agrees to a dinner date at Canaan House. The house itself is a physical testament to disparate materials trying to adhere without any success. It's cheerfully eccentric, a chaotic architectural mashup of Victorian, Romanesque, Tudor, capped by a mad Dracula turret.
It's everything Rip would despise. Unsynergistic, unprogressive, and utterly chaotic.
Completely. But the architecture is secondary to the smell. The house carries this powerful decaying adhesion. The overwhelming stench is a cocktail of damp and cat pee and shit and rot and food mold and house filth and sink grunge.
Let's pause on that list because it's so specific and nauseating. It's not just old, it's actively decomposing.
It is. And this generalized decay is cut through by one specific, truly repulsive odor. A rank, nauseating, fishy stink.
Yeah.
Georgie realizes with sinking dread that this smell is dinner. The stench is a warning sign of structural and biological failure, yet Georgie feels compelled to ignore it.
The death-defying meal that follows is a test of Georgie's working-class resilience. She remembers eating worse in Kipax, but this meal pushes the limits. It starts with a horrifying, questionable liquid course, then boiled potatoes and leeks, and finally the fish. A curled at the corners fillet of something hard, brown, and yellow. It smells so sickening that she physically cannot bring herself to swallow it.
The fish is the perfect culinary metaphor for the dangerous bond Georgie is forming with the house and its history. It's repulsive, it's old, it smells of failure and decay, but it's still there, demanding to be consumed. The house is a system barely adhering to itself, fueled by questionable substances.
Adding to the sheer anarchy are the cats, the source of some of the stench and the physical aggression. We have the four: Wonder Boy the Bruiser, Violetta the Purr, Mussorgsky the Bed Sleeper, and of course the Stinker. They are a law unto themselves, embodying unchecked, aggressive instinct.
And Wonder Boy is the central example of this raw energy. Georgie witnesses him performing these acts of unbridled aggression. He rips the guts out of a starling, he rapes Violetta, and then he calmly settles down to lick his privates. This is the chaotic, unbridled animal nature that Georgie has suppressed in her polite suburban life with Rip. Canaan House, with its smells and its cats, represents an emotional surface that is completely roughed up, ready for a bond built on visceral reality rather than polite illusion.
Despite the filth and the chaos, there is beauty found ironically in discarded materials. Mrs. Shapiro, rooting through bundled rags taken from a skip under the main staircase, pulls out a gorgeous-sized 12 Karen Millen dress for Georgie, and it's a perfect fit.
This simple act of giving allows Georgie a moment of profound, shared humanity. She realizes that the dress came from a skip, meaning it was a relic of another heart had been splattered somewhere. The discarded garment is the physical embodiment of a previous failed human bond, and now it's becoming part of a new, tentative connection between two survivors.
It is during this chaotic period that Mrs. Shapiro begins to reveal her complex history, introducing her deceased husband, Artem Shapiro, a great Russian composer-musician. This leads to the staggering revelation of his trauma, the Kaiserwald Confession.
Artem was held in Kaiserwald, a concentration camp near Riga by the Baltic Sea. Georgie realizes this name is absent from the familiar roll call of death she learned about, suggesting it is a less told narrative of suffering. Artem, blonde hair and able to pass as Christian, managed to escape and join the Pobeda partisans in the Naliboki forest.
After escaping, he made the devastating journey back to Minsk to find his family. His mother had died of starvation or a broken heart, one sister of typhus, and the other was missing. This discovery caused a total spiritual and emotional fracture.
The music dies. The man who was a composer, whose identity was defined by harmony, found that the world had no harmony left. In an act of profound symbolic violence, he smashes his precious violin against a tree. His grief is so immense that it resolves into a single long howl.
But that howl is not the end of his adhesion. It's a new, aggressive bond to survival. When he joins a new group of Russian partisans, he taunts the Germans with a savage defiance. Ich bin der ewige Jude. I am the eternal or wandering Jew. He weaponizes his identity and his trauma, creating a fierce, unbreakable bond to life and revenge through suffering.
This history, the sheer weight of this trauma, is the heavy, powerful glue holding Mrs. Shapiro's constructed identity together. But that adhesion comes under threat when she slips on the ice, breaks her wrist, and ends up in the hospital.
Her behavior in the hospital perfectly reflects her lifelong habit of blurring boundaries and adopting a pick-and-mix approach to identity. She demands a kosher pick-and-mix, no ham, no sausage, but Beck and I like.
Right. She insists on adhering to her Jewish dietary laws while simultaneously demanding the forbidden. It shows her lifelong struggle to reconcile different, often contradictory influences.
This hospitalization, however, brings in external, official scrutiny represented by Mrs. Goodney, or the bad eel.
The bad eel. Goodney is a social worker with an ugly metallic voice like a rusty gate. She immediately distrusts Georgie. She suspects her of applying undue pressure to fleece the old biddy and gain control of Canaan House.
The suspicion is thick and the stakes are high. The house is a valuable asset, and Mrs. Goodney is threatening to use the leverage of a care home placement. Crucially, Georgie overhears Goodney on the phone mentioning Damian Hendricks of Hendricks & Wilson estate agents and discussing a cash offer.
So the plot thickens. It suggests the bad eel is attempting her own form of financial adhesion, trying to secure the property for professional gain, perhaps leveraging the old woman's vulnerability.
Seeking some form of necessary documentation for the hospital, Georgie finds a concealed drawer in the house. Inside is a Harlech Castle tin containing 6 photographs.
Oh.
A wedding photo, a woman labeled Letta 1950, a family labeled Wexler, and a photo of a barren landscape labeled Kifar Danyad. This confirms a deeply suppressed, hidden life, a secret history that was deliberately fractured and buried.
And the final piece of this mystery is the age discrepancy noted in the hospital. Mrs. Shapiro claims her birth date is October 8, 1925, making her 81, a manageable age. But the hospital record suggests she is actually 96. Why the lie? This deliberate misrepresentation of time and identity is the first major clue that the current Naomi Shapiro is itself a carefully constructed polymer, a deliberate act of psychological adhesion to ensure survival and belonging, adopted after the trauma of the war.
This is where the personal trauma of Canaan House expands into the global theater of conflict and national identity. The pieces go here when Mrs. Shapiro finally confesses her real name is Ella Wexler, confirming she was born in Hamburg in 1925.
And her background is vital here. She was part of a pluralistic pick-and-mix Jewish family. They observed both the Sabbath and Sunday, both Christmas and Hanukkah. This established her in a liminal space, accustomed to reconciling contradictions, even before the war. The Nazi persecution, the Nuremberg laws, the terror of Kristallnacht, the public humiliation forced the family to fracture and flee, eventually finding refuge in London's East End.
Her family's flight is a common narrative of fracture and displacement, but the story becomes incredibly complex with the introduction of the Danish connection and the original Naomi Lowenthal. Georgie learns about this through Chaim Shapiro, the son, who is about to enter the scene.
And the Danish story stands as a beacon of successful societal adhesion. When the Nazis planned to deport Danish Jews in 1943, the Danish government and its people actively resisted. They refused to distinguish between Jewish and Christian citizens, declaring, "Jews and Christians, we are all Danes."
It is an amazing story. This national refusal to fracture allowed a spontaneous, decentralized rescue effort. People offered shelter, money, and haphazard passage across the water to neutral Sweden.
It's an example of societal glue based on shared citizenship and a firm moral commitment to non-separation. Naomi Lowenthal, the original woman in the photos, and her father escaped in the stinking hull of a fishing boat during this resistance.
It was in a Swedish refugee center that Naomi Lowenthal, a fierce, dedicated Zionist, met Artem Shapiro, the trauma-ridden socialist Bundist from Byelorussian. They fell in love and married in London, but their political glues were inherently dissimilar.
Very dissimilar. Artem was a Bundist, a Jewish socialist who believed the solution to anti-Semitism was to fight for workers' rights and cultural autonomy within existing countries. Naomi, conversely, was a Zionist, believing the only safe adhesion required a complete separation and the creation of a Jewish homeland in Israel.
Naomi, blazing with this conviction, went to Israel alone to help build the homeland, Zion. She gave birth to their son, Chaim, named after the prominent Zionist Chaim Weizmann in Kfar Dandia near Lydda in 1950. She begged Artem to join her.
But Artem was sick with lung disease from his time as a partisan and remained in London. And this is where Ella Wexler, who had come to love Artem, stepped in. After Naomi tragically died of blood sickness in Israel, Ella adopted her role, adopting the name Naomi Shapiro and suppressing the letters and photos that documented the substitution.
It was a profound choice of psychological adhesion. Ella glued herself into a ready-made life, securing Artem's final years with a familiar name and ensuring her own status as a survivor and member of a family. The suppressed history, the photos and letters found by Georgie, were the fragments of the original bond that had to be buried to allow the new substitute bond to hold.
And the very concept of homeland, which was the powerful unifying glue for Zionists, simultaneously created the most intense fracture for others. This brings us to the counter-narrative, embodied by Mr. Ali, the Palestinian handyman Georgie hires, to fix the structural failures of Canaan House, the broken gutter, the leaking windows.
Mr. Ali, Mustafa Al-Ali, is practical, focused on repair. He brings his useless nephews, Ishmael, who has an aeronautical scholarship, and Nabil, who are living in the attic. When Georgie asks about his origins, Mr. Ali reveals he is from Lydda, the same place named in Ella's hidden photographs.
The convergence is chilling. Mr. Ali asks Georgie if she knows about the Nakba, the catastrophe. He calmly provides the contrasting narrative. The land was not without people. He explains that the British gave away land that didn't belong to them, using the slogan, "Land without people, people without land," and that Palestinians were forced out through terror and clearance.
He provides the essential context that the Zionist drive, in his view, was not extermination, but clearance, the physical removal of a population to make room for another. He then asks the crucial, poignant question that defines the entire political fracture, why they make their revenge on us. He is pointing out that the very people who suffered immense displacement are now causing immense displacement in return.
This historical fracture is immediate and tangible. Mr. Ali draws a map on a newspaper showing his memory of the place. Later, the young activist at Sainsbury's shows Georgie a leaflet illustrating the green line and the contorted snaking line of the separation wall. This is the visual proof that the fracture is not relegated to history books. It is a current, physical reality defining people's lives, a constant, painful separation line imposed on a shared land.
And this global political anxiety, the Lydda connection, perfectly intersects with Ben's personal prophetic obsession. Ben, using the location Lydda from the family photos and the maps he's seen, connects it to the prophecy in which the Muslim Antichrist, the Dajjal, who is described as having one eye, gets killed by Jesus at the gates of Lydda.
This is a moment of astonishing literary and narrative climax. The text has built up this expectation of absolute, destructive conflict tied to a very specific place. The tension culminates when Chaim Shapiro, the Zionist son born in Kfar Dandia near Lydda, finally arrives at Canaan House.
Chaim is described as thick-set, with close-cut blonde hair, built like a rugby player. He is here to claim his mother's, or rather the substituted Naomi's, legacy. And then Georgie makes the crucial, terrifying observation about his appearance. He has a glass eye, which appears asymmetrical, misaligned.
Wow. So the source material is making an overt, if terrifyingly coincidental, connection. The Zionist son, arriving to claim his heritage and enforce boundaries, physically embodies the very prophecy, the one-eyed Antichrist, that the anxious, fractured teenager Ben sees as the ultimate necessary conclusion to global conflict.
It's the meeting point of personal neurosis and global political reality. The house itself becomes the world stage for Armageddon.
And what does Chaim immediately try to do?
He tries to enforce separation within Canaan House itself. He attempts to install a water separation system in the attic, Jewish water versus Arab water, reflecting the real-world conflict over shared resources.
The result is immediate and catastrophic, perfectly symbolizing the futility of trying to enforce separation in a unified system. The attempt leads to a massive leak, water streams through the ceiling, the hall fills up with steam, and Mrs. Shapiro declares, with perfect, chaotic clarity, "It's all your fault. You wanted to make voter separation, Jewish voter, Arab voter, so now we have pissing voter."
The chaos, the steam, the warm, leaking water, it's the absolute failure of separationist adhesion. The resources cannot be cleanly divided. The people in the house, like the people in the region, are forced to share the resulting mess. The idea of separate, clean components is rendered impossible by the shared reality of the plumbing.
So as the Cannon House drama is unfolding, Georgie's personal fracture has created openings for other temporary adhesions. The estate agents seeking to control the house asset become literal competitors for the emotional assets in Georgie's life.
We see Nick Wolf, who wanted to buy the house outright and brought Sherry as goodwill, and the main competitor, Mark Diabello, the partner who offered the valuation. Mark Diabello, with his mesmerizing black treacle voice and scent of musky soap and chlorine from his diving hobby, becomes Georgie's predictable rebound relationship.
And the relationship is characterized by efficiency, mirroring his professional life. The source notes his hands work with the same target-driven efficiency he uses in real estate. This bond is purely functional. It's an adhesion of necessity, a quick, clean fix for the whole rip left, a bond based on meeting immediate needs rather than genuine intimacy.
But this bond is shallow. It lacks any real depth. It's defined by Georgie's shame, her fake orgasms, and Rip's discovery that she's writing terrible poetry about Diabello, a mandolin player with lapis lazuli eyes.
It's a temporary polymer, aesthetically pleasing on the surface but doomed to break under any real stress.
Meanwhile, Georgie is establishing a much deeper, more complex intellectual bond with Nathan Stein, the editor of adhesives in the modern world. Nathan is the hunkily intelligent editor with horn-rimmed glasses, though Georgie knows he's a bit short. He eventually reveals he is a self-hating gay Jew, a term he explains neo-Zionists use dismissively for any Jew who questions the state of Israel's policies.
Their discussions move the concept of glue from the technical to the intensely satirical and metaphorical. They joke darkly about glue made from boiled-up illegal immigrants and the horrifying idea of Jews making glue out of Palestinians, using the technical framework to discuss the cynical, coercive ways groups are forced into proximity or removed entirely.
This intellectual bond allows Georgie to finally articulate a core insight gleaned from her technical work that applies perfectly to her failed marriage and the global conflict she is now witnessing. She says surface attraction is increased by roughing up the surfaces to be bonded, like in an abusive relationship. It's the mutual damage that holds the two sides together.
That is a profoundly dark, yet perhaps truthful observation about human adhesion. It suggests that shared pain and conflict, the roughing up of the material, creates a stronger mechanical bond based on mutual necessity and shared trauma than any smooth, polite, or ideal love. It implies that domestic abuse and geopolitical conflict operate on the same principle of negative adhesion.
But Nathan challenges this dark structural assumption. Georgie is operating under the belief that suffering must create compassion. Nathan counters. Abused children often grow up to become abusers themselves. It's what they learn.
And this is a crucial pivot point. Trauma doesn't automatically lead to moral improvement or resolution. It often leads to replication of the fracture.
This realization shifts the entire focus away from needing a grand emotional gesture, a perfect new adhesive, and towards something more pragmatic. Georgie begins to reflect that maybe forgiveness isn't a miraculous emotional leap, but simply a matter of habit. The slow, grinding peace that comes when two feuding communities, like her old mining village of Kipax, are forced to tolerate one another until a generation passes and the original conflict is forgotten. Habitual peace, not cathartic love.
And the ultimate personal test of whether this tentative collaboration can be achieved comes when Ben, overwhelmed by his liminal anxiety and obsession with the Antichrist content, suffers a frightening episode. A possible seizure or collapse. He is rushed to the hospital.
The crisis instantly forces Rip and the daughter Stella to appear. Stella, the sane voice in the family chaos, is the catalyst for the truce. She is the one who forces her parents to stop their perpetual argy-bargy for Ben's sake. The child's crisis forces the parents back into proximity.
This crisis forces a temporary, practical reconciliation. Rip sheepishly moves back in, temporarily, and the couple makes a tentative stab at collaboration by hiding Easter eggs together for Stella. It's not love, it's a shared collaborative duty, the mechanical adhesion of parenthood triumphing over spousal fracture.
Rip also reveals that his own grand system has fractured. He is done with the Progress Project. His high-stakes global ambition has failed, and he is applying to the Synergy Foundation.
The irony, he's simply replacing one piece of abstract corporate jargon with another. The failure of progress leads to the adoption of synergy.
And Georgie immediately notes that Synergy Foundation sounds like something you put on your face, a cosmetic rather than structural fix.
It's a hilarious, self-aware moment that shows Rip's admission of personal failure masked by glossy corporate language. His system of high-stakes ambition, which caused the initial domestic fracture, has failed him too.
The true symbol of repair, the final moment of adhesion, arrives when Georgie finds herself in the newly renovated Canaan House bathroom. It's sparkling, if slightly visually jarring, a pink sink next to an avocado bath, and there it is, the physical symbol of her marital disaster, the discarded white porcelain toothbrush holder.
But it's not discarded, it is fixed securely to the wall. And the person who performed this final, perfect, mundane act of domestic adhesion was Mr. Ali, the Palestinian handyman. The man displaced by historical conflict provided the fix for Georgie's domestic fracture.
The sight of that fixed toothbrush holder forces Georgie's final realization. She looks at it and recognizes that the fight was never about the object itself. It was just a toothbrush holder, small and insignificant when weighed against the massive human dramas witnessed by the house Ella's adopted identity, Artem's trauma, Mr. Ali's displacement from Lydda.
The domestic fracture is dwarfed by the global ones, but both require the same principle: repair.
The source ends with a chaotic, triumphant celebration, a barbecue at Canaan House, signaling a difficult but existing patchwork piece. Georgie and Rip are tentatively together. Mrs. Badil shows up looking ethereal in muslin. Nathan's Tati flirts with Mrs. Shapiro. Even the aggressive, feuding Katz Mazorsky and Wonder Boy fight, only to be separated and intervened upon by Nabil, one of Mr. Ali's useless nephews.
The chaos remains, but it's managed. Georgie reflects on the sheer impossibility of the lives around her, the buried history, the Middle Eastern tension brought physically into the hall, her own messy, ongoing reunion, but she concludes that everyone is learning to live here somehow.
Her final intellectual conclusion, drawn from the sources, is that if human bonding were right meaning, if the basic ability to tolerate and coexist with conflicting perspectives and damaged history can be achieved, then perhaps the external details, the laws, the boundaries, the political borders might eventually fall into place. The adhesion must start at the level of personal habit and necessary collaboration.
We have completed our deep dive into the chemistry of unbonding and the search for human glue. We've seen the sheer volatility of human relationships, how a tiny, milky splatter of froth can trigger a permanent separation, just as a national conviction can trigger massive, violent displacement.
We observed multiple layers of adhesion. There was the destructive adhesion of shared damage, where roughing up the surfaces holds two people together in trauma. There was the necessary psychological adhesion, where Ella Wexler adopted the identity of Naomi Shapiro to survive. And there was the adhesion of habit, where Rip and Georgie found a truce not through love, but through shared responsibility.
The source material forces us to confront the reality that the most powerful forms of bonding are often messy, complex, and driven by necessity or survival, rather than ideal love or a conscious will for peace. The structural flaws in a marriage or a homeland are often exposed not by grand events, but by a small, overlooked detail, like a missing raw plug.
We saw the incredible, fierce efforts people make to find a homeland. Whether it is a physical place like Zion, Lydda, or Kipax, or a human structure centered on family. The love for a place or a cause can be a powerful glue, but we also saw how that very glue can lead to the greatest acts of displacement and cruelty, as Mr. Ali reminded us.
So we leave you with this final, provocative thought, learner. We have observed that absolute conviction, whether it's Rip's abstract progress, Naomi's fierce Zionism, or Ben's apocalyptic prophecy, acts as a powerful but ultimately volatile and fracture-prone adhesive. If love and absolute conviction can be dangerous adhesives, what is the safest, most durable form of human connection?
Is it found in the deep, painful history we must not forget, the Megillah of suffering and flight that Ella buried in the Harlech Castle tin? Or is the strongest adhesion found in the simple, mundane, often humorous act of two people, two families, or two communities choosing day after difficult day to tolerate one another until that necessary collaboration slowly, painstakingly turns into a lasting shared habit?
The fix may not be dramatic superglue, but a simple, practical raw plug applied by the hands of someone who understands loss.